The way people talk about white privilege is just all wrong. If I reach into my wallet right now and take it out and do not get shot for it, that's not a privilege. That's just my basic rights being respected. If I go and have a job interview and don't get judged on the basis of the color of my skin and don't face discrimination, again, that's not a privilege that I have. That's my basic rights being respected. The conversation about white privilege, it makes it sound as if not having your rights violated is a special privilege that people have. But the reality is that nobody should face discrimination. Nobody should be shot for no reason by a police officer. No one should be, discriminated against in housing or employment. People shouldn't be judged on the basis of their race or their gender or anything, right? People should be judged on the contents of their character. People shouldn't have their human rights violated. The manifestations of racism that we see in the United States are things that shouldn't happen to anyone. They happen to people of color, and that's wrong. But when you talk about privilege, you almost make it sound as if these things should be happening, that people should have their rights violated. People should have their basic human rights violated. People should get shot. People should get discriminated against. And the fact that it doesn't happen to certain people because of their skin color, why, this is a privilege that they have. This is a special privilege they have that's not fair. Well, that's just completely not a good way to frame it up. And if you frame it up that way, you have to admit people are going to be resentful about it. If you frame it up to people as, oh, you have something special, you have it too good, you don't deserve to have it that good, people are going to be resentful and they're not going to listen to you. The way that the conversation around white privilege, and I mean, the people who talk about white privilege are pointing toward a real thing, that if you are African American, if you're Latino, you're going to have a much harder life in the United States because of, systemic built-in problems and bigotry and discrimination and racism. But if you frame it up as privilege, and if you frame the conversation around the phrase white privilege, you're essentially setting up for there to be resentment. The problem isn't that white people in the United States have it too good and they need to be taken down a peg and they need to suffer more in order to make it fair. The problem is that some people face a huge amount of discrimination and injustice in their lives, and that needs to be corrected. The point is to bring everyone up, starting with those who need it the most, not to bring everyone down in order to make it more fair. But the way the conversation has been framed on the universities, where, these well-funded operations, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller family, these well-funded operations that fund these student departments, black studies, gender studies, where people are sitting around and talking about who's the most privileged, it's almost like they've been framed up in a way to be divisive. It's almost like it's been done in order to incite Americans against each other. I mean, take, for example, the issue of police brutality. Everywhere you go in the United States, people are concerned about the overreach of government. It's not just police brutality. At this point, the NSA is tapping our phone calls. The surveillance is out of control. We've got the raids, the no-knock raids where doors are being kicked down. All across the USA, wherever you go, left-wing, right-wing, white, black, rural, urban, people are concerned about the overreach of government and how our civil liberties are being taken away. However, when the conversation suddenly becomes racial, and when it becomes about, one group of people, all of a sudden it gets divided. And people that hate the government and think the government is violating their rights, they'll hear about a black person facing police brutality, they'll hear the chants of Black Lives Matter, and they'll get angry and start defending the police. Meanwhile, when there are white people in the United States who are suffering and the police are coming down on them, rather than saying, oh wow, see, this is expanding, this is getting worse, the police state is everywhere, you'll hear, oh, it would be so much worse if they were African American. This is a divisive conversation. It's not the kind of conversation we need to be having. The reality is that racism exists. There is built-in systemic discrimination. People of color in the United States have it much harder than white people. That's just a fact. However, the police state is expanding. It's coming down on everyone, and we all need to get out of the mess of poverty, war, and discrimination, the low-wage police state that is coming down on Americans. As the economy crashes and burns, as our standard of living drops, the police state is escalating, conditions are getting worse, and all of us are facing a problem, and it's coming down the hardest, of course, on the communities that have been facing this stuff for years. However, if you frame it simply in terms of privilege, if you frame it as if everyone should be suffering, and those who don't suffer suffer, you know, that's unfair, they've got it too good. If you frame it that way, you're just going to sow more division and things are just going to get worse. Racism is real, discrimination is real, what people refer to when they're using the term white privilege is real, but the conversation around it is completely wrong.